All right. Well, welcome everyone, and welcome Ben. This is, I think, the first recording that Estuary is doing this year. So yeah, nice to see everyone. And the topic of the day is going to be data warehouses, everything about the current state of data warehouses and where they are headed to the future. And yeah, we're going to discuss the benchmark report that Estuary did as well earlier this year with Ben. And I think the best topic to kick us off would be a short introduction from you, Ben. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, hey there, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Ben Rojan, aka the Seattle Data Guy, is what probably many people know me by. My current role is I consult for lots of different companies, helping them set up their data infrastructure, helping them pick the right tooling. Before that, worked at Facebook and some startups and a healthcare provider. And now I just put out a ton of content and again, do a lot of consulting. So you might have seen a video from me or a newsletter. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
awesome. And you work with a lot of data warehouses, I assume, right?
Yes. Yeah. I get to play around with a lot of them. Lots of Snowflake, good amount of Databricks, and a good amount of BigQuery here and there as well. So, yeah.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions prepared about data warehouses in general and their future. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to say a few words about the benchmark study or benchmark report that we published a few weeks ago. So some of you may have already seen this. We actually benchmarked Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, Redshift, and Fabric as well. We compiled all the results into, I think it came out to be 40 pages in the end. And we tried to be as objective as possible, which is obviously impossible to be completely objective when you do benchmarks. But what we strived for was to be vendor neutral as much as possible. We tried to stay true to the default configs. We used bigger data sets, like a terabyte at least. And we rolled our own queries instead of using pre-built queries for the TPC-H dataset that a lot of warehouses are sneakily already optimized for, as we came to know. So yeah, I don't know, Ben, if you had a chance to read the report, but I think one of the key highlights was that Snowflake as an all-rounder was pretty much almost the best in every category. It managed to scale without any issues, even with the smallest warehouses. But for AI and machine learning workloads, it was not the best because Databricks has a little bit of a lead there, as they historically have more AI and machine learning functionality built in. I don't know if you've worked with, you probably work with both of these platforms, and I'm very curious about your opinion on which one does what better, which one fits what workload a bit better, and yeah, what kind of teams you see use these two.
Yeah, sure. And I think there's a lot of trouble you can get in saying any specific direction, especially from people who like specific tooling. I mean, I think that's what you've already probably found after releasing the report. I'm sure you've had some people respond being like, no, these different tools, whatever, our tool's better, or you didn't use something right. And I think that's always going to be a challenge. I want to say with benchmarks, like your goal is performance and not necessarily getting things done. So sometimes you can focus a little more on fine tuning, whereas maybe if you've used Databricks or Snowflake or BigQuery in production, yeah, you're going for performance, but you're also being like, well, I got to finish this while juggling 5 other requests. So, maybe you're not perfectly optimizing every query. I think it sounds about right, at least from like my experience with these tools. Snowflake tends to be the one that's just easy, like, this is again one of those places you can get in trouble. It's like tends to feel like the easiest to work with. I think BigQuery is often what I find is like you can just get it running out of the box very, very simply. But I dislike that I have a harder time fine tuning it. Whereas Snowflake, I have a little more freedom. And then Databricks, I think what often strikes most people is the amount of options you have for compute, and so sometimes that can be challenging. So I'd be curious to know how you kind of figured out what compute to use, et cetera, because I think that's where a lot of the challenges I find people often get confused in terms of like, okay, now there's serverless. Should I use that? Is that better than what, the old gen of options? And so I'm curious how your team picked on those.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that's something that we got a lot of feedback on as well after we published the report. So our mindset in the beginning was to use the most default warehouse or compute possible for every platform that probably someone new to the warehouse and not necessarily an expert in would also opt for. So we could mimic the majority of use cases. But immediately we got a lot of feedback from Snowflake users and Databricks users that you should have used the Gen2 warehouses in Snowflake. You should have used this type of compute in Databricks. So it's pretty much impossible to. This is why I mentioned that it's impossible to please everyone in this sense. But at the same time, it's still very useful to have some kind of report there that you can at least refer to for those specific use cases. And we are already working on the second iteration actually ourselves, where we will try to incorporate all these feedbacks and try to just make a version that is even better and hopefully aligns with the rest of the workloads as well.
Yeah, but by the time you launch it, there's gonna be like Snowflake Gen2 and Databricks, I don't know, Gemini something, and you'll be like, okay, what am I doing? How am I supposed to keep up?
Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah, I didn't expect the benchmark to take up so much time, but we wanted to get it right, and I think in the end it took up almost 2 months to put together, like running the queries, evaluating them, running them again, and again. And yeah, it was a timely endeavor and costly too. But yeah, so definitely working on the second iteration as well. So I'm super curious. Like you obviously work as a data consultant and you evaluate a lot of these warehouses yourself, mostly for specific use cases for the clients that you work with. And I just want to get a little bit of an insight into what goes through your mind when you're evaluating the warehouses. Like, do you use benchmarks like these, or do you benchmark your own? Do you not do performance or price benchmarks at all and just look at some other stuff?
Yeah, definitely pay attention to obviously benchmarks and try to understand, what's going to work best for the client. I think cost is always a big factor, right? Like, what's something going to cost them on the other side? And not just in terms of how much is Snowflake or Databricks going to cost, but also in terms of like, do I need to hire an extra engineer? Do I need to hire a specialist in a specific tool set to really get this set up correctly and configured correctly? And then, ease of use, I think, is another big space, right? Like, especially, or at least depending on the talent that they have. It's like, do they have more engineering-based talent? Do they have more analytics-based talent, et cetera? There does tend to seem to be a preference for certain tooling, depending on kind of maybe your background a little bit. I just saw a post where someone said you should no longer think about, obviously, Spark or Databricks is like Spark versus SQL is like Snowflake versus Databricks, which I think is fair. But that still, I think, kind of has some people, like how people sometimes think about it, or like they often think about Databricks as like, this is ML and AI. I think you kind of covered that as well. Whereas Snowflake, I also find is like very well tuned in general processes. And so if you have maybe a team that needs to get work done, it's often a pretty reliable choice where it's like, it's even on an extra small, a lot of companies can get pretty far. Obviously, if you're doing terabytes and terabytes, probably less so. But honestly, I see plenty of companies who have not the largest data sets or even decently large data sets get pretty far on a small instance. And then it's easy to explain costs too, I think, in that space too. As much as you can say Snowflake's expensive, I can explain their costs very easily, and I can help you keep your costs down because of that. If it's harder to explain your costs, it's harder to explain how I can reduce the cost, or harder for you in the future to do so. So I think all of those things come into play when picking a solution, right? Like, you want to know, what talent do they have? Do they need to hire new talent if they pick a different solution? What's going to be the cost? How much maintenance will they need? Like, do they need me to keep coming in and updating things, or can they kind of run it on their own? And so all of that stuff I think comes into play. And again, also benchmarks, because it's nice to see, okay, if we do have larger data sets, what are the limitations? And it was really good that you guys kind of, I think, took some more of those complex queries and wrote them, because I think that's often the challenge, is sometimes some of those benchmark queries, like, they focus more on like pretty straightforward joins and aggregations. And there's a lot, like, people do way crazier things than that in most of their queries. So
yeah, I think we put the Franken query into the benchmark as well. That was inspired by actually one of your earlier comments before we started the report, and that's like 1,000 long query with like many CPs and I don't even know how many joins.
yeah,
Just to see which warehouse is able to handle that at all, and yeah, not many.
no, I imagine.
Yeah. But so I kind of get a feeling that, based on what you're saying, is that it's hard to go wrong with any of these warehouses for majority of the use cases, right?
I'd say, like, in many ways, yeah, like you're gonna get decently far for most people. I think where you're gonna find the differences in that case is like, what do you prefer? Like, what workflow do you prefer? I just tend to find that, if you are more focused on kind of SQL, if you're coming from that SQL space, I do think you just tend to fall into Snowflake, and it feels familiar. Again, obviously, people on the Databricks side, I think, would argue that they've got SQL pretty heavily embedded now. But that's just what I found, and I actually just had a client where that was the situation, where it was like they had somehow gotten both Databricks and Snowflake in, and the reason they had Snowflake was because the analysts preferred Snowflake, and the reason they had Databricks is because the data engineers preferred Databricks. And it was just like, there are, I think, to some degree, like, things around the product that people prefer. And so once you pick one, you kind of end up almost falling into that house like Harry Potter or something. But yeah. It's like you just tend to fall in it. BigQuery, I think, is nice. I think, again, the limitations I don't like on there, it's just like sometimes I feel a little limited on how I can scale. Like, if I want to fine tune things a little more, I feel a little more limited. But it works. I think that's the big thing, is like, they usually work. I haven't run into too many limitations overall on any of them. So
That's a very interesting thing that you brought up. You mentioned that you worked with a client who had both Databricks and Snowflake. Is that something that you see often when you work with these clients, that they have multiple data warehouses in place? And yeah, I'm just curious, what's your opinion on that? Like, does it actually make sense?
yeah, I think it happens, especially a lot of larger organizations. Sometimes it's because they literally will try to maybe do certain workflows in one and certain workflows in the other. Right? They'll try to do their their AI and ML workflows on Databricks, because, kind of like you said, it tends to be a little bit more fine-tuned towards that. And then they'll try to do more of their traditional data warehousing on Snowflake, and provide that for their analysts. It does seem to be somewhat that way. The other way is, like, sometimes it's just like different teams. Like, the marketing team went with Snowflake, the Databricks, or the like operations team went with Databricks or something. It's no longer. It used to be that you probably were fighting more for like a large contract if you're like Teradata or something, right? Like, it's like you had to win a contract, and like it literally required you to physically install a server into a location. And so there was a lot more of like buy-in required, in terms of like, you couldn't just, sign for a free trial, or just start using some credits on a small instance of a Snowflake or Databricks. Nowadays, it's all about consumption. Like, how can you convince people that our tool is the best tool for whatever workflow you have? I actually remember seeing a salesperson's LinkedIn say something about, instead of like quota, where you usually say like, 160% of quota, it was like, I got 160% of like consumption quota for Databricks, because that's what you're selling. You're selling like, how much can you get people to consume, and it's very different than just selling like tons of contracts and trying to get a ton of contracts. It's like, no, you just try to get one contract. And then if you try to double that contract, that's like getting two rather than one. So that's generally a lot of the focus now is like, well, how do we make it so we're such a good tool that people want to use us for more than just what they're currently using for? We're like, oh, Databricks. Well, how do we get them to use us for data warehousing workflows? And then obviously Snowflake's currently going the other way and being like, how do we get you using us for AI and ML workflows?
Right. And I think both of them are also dabbling in application development infrastructure as well, with like operational databases and like deployment modes for actual backend. So I kind of feel like they are trying to be cloud service providers to some extent, which is an interesting business model.
I just read, I think Hugo from Orchestra just wrote a little section on that where he was talking about that. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like, it's like, I'm finding a lot of companies starting to, and they've been talking about this for a while, and, you know, everyone's got different things, but like, you know, they're starting to slowly build like an application on top of like maybe Snowflake or, you know, everyone's kind of building into that as well. Like I know Salesforce has been trying to build into the more data warehousing, data pipeline space for a little bit as well. And they already have Tableau. They're like, oh, just build on top of us. You know, it's interesting seeing everyone trying to be everything. I mean, that's, again, going back to like SAP and things like that, that's how it was, right? I think from there, they went the other way where they'd often build, it's more that Salesforce, they went like we built an ERP. Now you should just build all your stuff on top of us, like your analytics, et cetera. I mean, if you can hold that for a while, you can exist for a long time. Like SAP still exists. All these companies still exist. Maybe you don't think about them as cutting edge in terms of BI and AI, but, you know, they exist. They're doing a lot of stuff. They have their own challenges because they're older, but, you know, they're running a lot of the world. So
that's true. Yeah. I think as a data engineer, a Salesforce data warehouse is something that I don't necessarily want to see become a reality.
No, I don't think so either.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm actually curious. Like, do you see these old monolithic data warehouses as a consultant nowadays? Do you work with clients that have like Teradata or stuff like that still active, or it's mostly more like migrating from those into a more modern cloud-based data warehouse?
Yeah, definitely a lot of migrations. I think because I've written a lot of content around migrations, so I think I've gotten a lot of that. So yeah, maybe more of the on-prem Teradata to Snowflake. A lot of SQL servers to Snowflake for sure. Just, you know, people who've been there for a while and now they're like, all right, we want a little more freedom in terms of like being able to use more. And often what I find in those cases is, you know, you're often restricted to a degree either on compute or storage space on-prem. And so when you go into the cloud, they often find that like, hey, I can start bringing in new data sets that I've never brought in before. I can start moving a little bit faster. Obviously, the trade-off is, you know, there's this cost factor where whether you're using, again, Databricks, BigQuery, or Snowflake, suddenly you can increase your consumption without really realizing it. And so I think that's always the trade-off. It's like, yeah, it's so much easier. You can use Estuary or something similar to load the data. You don't have to think about writing, you know, an API connector every time. You can just get in there. So now you get new data sets in there. Start writing more queries, you start letting more people access it. And so that's great in some ways. In other ways, it's like you're going to see costs possibly increase, maybe in good ways in the sense that you're using it now and in answering new questions, but also possibly in bad ways where it's like people are building things that no one's using. And you know, that's a whole other side of problems.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And in your experience, how sticky is a data warehouse for a company? You mentioned that you work on a lot of migrations. Like, are those like once in a lifetime for a company, or do you see that some companies actually migrate multiple times in every few years?
Yeah, companies definitely migrate to a degree, right? I think some companies are more inclined to migrate than others. Like sometimes it feels like they'll do one every 3 to 4 years on just the data warehouse. Obviously, then they're migrating like their data pipeline tool on the other years that they're not migrating their data warehouse. But overall, I do think there's like some level of stickiness, right? Like it's hard once you've migrated to Snowflake or once you've migrated to Databricks, it's hard to like suddenly switch and be like, all right, let's now go back to Snowflake. But I've seen people go back and forth multiple times. I had one client who like they tried like all of them. They were like, we were on Snowflake, then we went to BigQuery, then we went to Databricks, and we're back to Snowflake. And I'm just like, this is wild. Like, this is a lot of money that you're spending. And I hope you're like getting the improvements you think you are, but I don't think you are. I think you just gotta, again, you're gonna find something that sucks about all tools. There's always some limitation. You kind of got to learn to be like, that's a limitation, and I got to code around it or figure out how to improve it, because that's my job as an engineer, rather than sitting there and being like, well, it doesn't work, so I'm going to look for a tool that fixes that problem.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Shifting gears a little bit, I would love to talk a little bit about the smaller data warehouses that are coming up in the past few years. There's been, obviously, in the benchmark project, we talked about like BigQuery, Snowflake, Redshift, and Fabric, which are like tried and true. They're the big guys. But there's a bunch of new players like MotherDuck or ClickHouse, Firebolt, even Single Store as well. I wonder if you have any experience with those. Do you see them come up when you're evaluating options, or do you see them actually in use already in some of your clients? And in general, what's your opinion there?
Yeah, I feel like I've not necessarily run into like Firebolt anywhere in particular. MotherDuck, poked around with it more on like the DuckDB side on some local projects. I really haven't tested out their like actual commercial service. So I'd be curious like how that operates. I remember talking to, I don't remember who it was from their team a while back, and they were kind of explaining their vision. I thought it was a great vision. I need to like be able to test out their product, because I think that'd be something cool. ClickHouse, I've had a few clients on ClickHouse. I think, you said small, like they're obviously small in the sense of other data warehouses. Like you compare them to like Oracle's data warehouse or Snowflake or any of these that have billions of dollars. They're tiny, but I do think ClickHouse has some weight. I found that they tend to be for specific use cases where it's either more application based or like very focused on real time, versus like more generic, like where you're like, I need a more generic use case, then you're going to use, that BigQuery, Snowflake kind of tooling choice. And so, yeah, it seems to be very specific. And then Single Store, I've had people that I've talked to use it, and they enjoy it for what it is in terms of kind of being able to kind of switch back and forth between analytics and operational. But I haven't had to use them, I think, more specifically on like specific for clients. They tend to have very specific use cases. I think the big things, they tend to be niche players. Like Firebolt's big thing, I don't know if they're still kind of poking on this, is like their speed and their performance is better than most, which is one specific metric, which is a good metric, but not the only one that people need sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I also feel like that these newcomer or challenger data warehouses are also specialized in certain things. And I assume that once they gain some traction, they will do everything else that the current warehouses do as well, try to gain more share of the market that way. We do have a second iteration, or the second version of a benchmark report coming out that will include some of these. And as you said, smaller doesn't really make sense in this context. So I usually call them challenger data warehouses, just because they're a bit newer on the scene, and they are here to make a big splash. So in a few weeks, hopefully, we'll manage to wrap up that report too, and maybe we can do another discussion about the results from there. Yeah,
I'd love that. It's kind of, I like that you use the word splash. You could say MotherDuck is diving into Estuary or something. I think that's like the funny thing I've thought about with like, you got Iceberg, you got MotherDuck, you got Estuary. Like, do we need some other water kind of based things in there? I don't know. Is there anything else in there that kind of fit in the water based things? I remember one year someone made a joke about the fact that like so many data technologies use like octopus or something similar to that in their things. Like I think Airbytes was, I think Census was a jellyfish actually, maybe, but there's like a few different that like use something octopus like, and so it's like a very funny post about that.
Yeah, Estuary, it's a little known fact that Estuary did have a mascot, an animal mascot as well. Maybe it's time to bring it back.
What was the mascot? I don't actually know that.
It wasn't an octopus. It was an otter.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think it's fine. Like I'm not a huge mascot fan, but I get that some people like it. I think I want to say who else had an otter that I remember or something similar to an otter. And I'm trying to remember what there was another company I feel like that
I
had.
think there was a lot. Yeah, it's hard to come up with an animal mascot that hasn't
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
used already.
I like to say like you got to focus more on the product, and then eventually like once your Salesforce side, then you can start doing random mascots, because that's more of that game. But right now it's like,
Yeah, definitely.
but I'll let you all do that. I'm not privy to the marketing. That's funny.
Cool. Yeah, so once that report comes out, we'll probably come back to that topic. Another big thing recently in the data warehouse world is actually lake houses, which are kind of the next iteration. So separation of storage and compute has always been a big thing, even in data warehouses. Like that was one of the things that Snowflake originally ran on, that internally they separated storage and compute. But the big difference is that with lakehouses, it's more of an external separation. Like you can bring a different compute to a different storage and mix and match however you want. There's obviously like open table formats and all kinds of stuff there. So I do wonder that when you work with your clients, do you see more popularity or more a tendency for lakehouse architectures lately, even with Snowflake and Databricks or some other service?
Yeah, I think for some of maybe the larger clients, there's at least a little more interest, and I think it makes more sense once it's like, again, if you have a smaller data team, I think you're gonna spend you could lose a lot of time trying to set everything up, and you won't see the benefits, I believe, as much. But yeah, definitely for some of the larger clients, there's some value, I think, in having that separation. You could, in theory, also now have multiple computes. Again, then it really, really, really becomes all about consumption. How can you convince people that your engine is the best to use for different forms of use cases, whether it's ML or traditional data warehousing? And then you're really limited. And it's like if someone decides to switch, they can switch. Again, that also depends on how you set it up. A lot of people are still using like the vendor's version essentially of either Iceberg or something. So you can kind of see the vendors still want to create their own wall around that. They're like, we still want to make sure we own something here. So that's always going to be the play, is like there's going to need to be some way that you keep your flows more protected, because you don't want to lose them easily, because then you don't have much power in contract negotiations and things like that. But yeah, I mean, people are at least poking at it and trying it. I still think we need to see, like, people need to have clear paths forward. I think that's the big thing. It's like, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to implement it well. And there's only so many people that have actually implemented it well. So it's kind of this interesting balance where you need to have enough talent that can also do it and reliably do it. Otherwise, you can have a lot of projects that are half done. I've seen it happen on other examples of paradigms, like with data vaults. I've come into a few examples of that where someone tried to do that, didn't go well, they're no longer there, now you got to fix it. And I think you're gonna see the same thing here, where it's like there's gonna be some good implementations, there's gonna be some bad implementations, and some people are just gonna be better off not trying to go that route and keeping it a little simpler, and just being able to answer questions and focusing on that, versus like, hey, let's do everything in Iceberg.
Right. Yeah. And I think Iceberg is currently, I don't want to say the winner in the open table format wars, but I kind of feel like it's definitely the most popular at this point. Is that what you see as well, or do you see like other table formats like Hoodie come up in the wild?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's like the discussion people have, is we were having the like Hoodie versus Iceberg, et cetera, conversation like a year or two ago. I think to a degree, whether it be via marketing, whether it be via like people are actually using it more, like once you start drowning out the others and you don't hear about the others as much, and you don't, like, when you say open table format, especially probably I imagine newer engineers, you probably think Iceberg first. It's a good sign that you're winning something. And when people have to make that choice, they're going to spend less time thinking about it, because we tend to, just go for the thing that we think about first. It's kind of like you winning the Kleenex war or whatever other marketing kind of mind share of a thing. It's like once you've won it, that's what people think. It's not to say that there aren't other brands. It's not to say that people don't buy those other brands or make those choices. It's just to say that you probably get a big portion of it, just because people are not like, there's a good portion of people that don't want to think like, what are the other options and why are they better or worse? Let me just pick the one that everyone's using, or at least everyone's talking about, and there's a lot of content about, and I can easily figure that out, versus maybe picking something that's a little more niche and has less support behind it, or at least that's how people view it. I actually don't know. I'd be curious if you can get like a little graphic of like, what are the star counts or maybe commit counts of these various libraries, just to see, or not libraries, but like Git repos. So
yeah, that's definitely a good question. And I think that these formats or frameworks being open completely is also a good opportunity for some of these challenger services that we talked about earlier. Like I know that ClickHouse, for example, has a pretty good Iceberg integration as well. So I feel like everybody's trying to capitalize on open table formats, even if internally they don't use it, but they want to be the best compute for Iceberg or the best compute for Hoodie. Although I haven't seen anything related to Hoodie lately, but Iceberg definitely. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting space. And if you ever get a chance to try out MotherDuck, I definitely also recommend to look into Duck Lake, which is their take on the Lakehouse architecture. And it's very, very cool. I gave it a spin earlier, and yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, once again, it really fits into the Estuary paradigm. You just like an estuary feeds into the Duck Lake. Now we just need there's no BI tool that's kind of, I don't even know, water-based, right? I don't know. I don't think so.
There should be. Yeah.
There's a bunch of like Greek letter types, Sigma, Omni. Is there anything else? I don't know. So I don't know. Yeah. Hex is quite different. Hex is slightly different.
The marketing material practically writes itself.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I don't know if it's I'm curious why water in particular seems to be people seem to like it.
And it flows like data flows, I guess. I don't know.
Yes, I think so.
Something like that.
I guess.
Yeah, speaking of data flows, I'm curious about, like, once you have a data warehouse, once you implement a Snowflake data warehouse or Databricks, the next challenge usually is getting data in there. I'm curious if you have any experience, or I'm sure you have experience with it, but I want to know more about the trade-offs between the native solutions for these warehouses for data ingestion, or like using a third-party service. Obviously, Estuary, we do move data into all of these data warehouses and from these data warehouses, but I want to see what, in your experience, what clients are looking for.
Yeah, I haven't seen anyone use the native solutions just yet. I've seen a lot of people talk about them. I think Ethan Aaron from Portable had a good breakdown of kind of some of the challenges. I think he was talking about like the HubSpot native connectors. That I do like. I have pulled in data via like the data, like the zero copy, like data sharing, essentially, like from HubSpot as one example. And it's nice, like when they have, like, for example, not even a pipeline, which is just like loaded into your data warehouse. It's kind of nice. With the HubSpot one, I remember it's a very what's the good word? Denormalized. So like you have to, from there, you still have to like, it's like almost broken down into the objects, and then you have to like build out each object separately afterwards. So it's like a very generic, it's not like broken out into specific tables of like whatever, I don't remember what the HubSpot objects were now, whatever it is, contacts, etc. But I have to like parse each one from there and say, okay, for objects 1 through 5, here's what I need you to do here for objects 1 through whatever, or 5 through whatever. But that can be nice. It can make it easy. Overall, I don't think people have tried like the more native, like the NIFI, or actually don't even, is that how you pronounce it? NIFI. I've never actually had to pronounce it in person or vocally. I know that they've been pushing that, or at least that was one of the things they released. I don't know if anyone's using it. But yeah,
that is open flow, right?
Yeah,
For
they're open
Snowflake,
flow.
that's what they call
They're
open
open
flow.
flow
Yeah.
option. So other than that, I find that the challenge often that most companies run into is like finding solutions that meet all of their needs, right? Because like no tool generally has all the data connectors that you want. So that's often the challenge. Is like you have to make a choice where it's like, do you pick the ones that are either most cost effective? Do you pick the one that has all the connectors you want? Do you where's the balance overall? And so obviously you've already referenced Estuary. Had plenty of setups with Estuary. Had somewhere we're replacing Fivetran. I think the times I use Fivetrans when I can get them for free, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's only 500,000 rows. Or you guys are only pulling in 100,000 rows. I mean, it's free. But those are smaller organizations. Obviously, they're doing like 100,000. But other than that, yeah, I don't think. I think there's still some people who try to build their own custom connectors. I've seen that occasionally. I try not to spend too much time on the data connector space in the sense of like I try to find a tool that does the thing that I need, because I don't want to like I think the value is in the transforms and actually using the data and not me having to get the data there somehow. I don't want to be writing an SFTP connector or a Salesforce connector, hopefully ever again, but I'm sure I'll have to do it at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I think every data engineer has to do that a few times.
You can't get away from it.
Cool. Yeah. My last question for you today is that after we covered pretty much not all aspects of data warehouses because they do so many things nowadays, but I'm curious if you have any like forward-looking ideas on what's next for warehouses. Is it lakehouses? Is it something else? Where are they heading in what direction?
One, I still find that like some people struggle to set up a data warehouse well. So I'm like, if you have a hard time setting up a data warehouse, you're gonna have a hard time setting up a data lakehouse as well. So there's that thought a little bit. I think what I find interesting is that there's still this need to set up data warehouses to a degree. I was talking to another vendor the other day, and they were like, it's one of those companies that's like, yeah, you can stick this on top of your data warehouse and you can ask us questions. And then I'm like, yeah, but you still need the semantic model. And like, yeah, we still need a semantic model on top of it. So there's still a lot of this, like, you still need to build, at least for some of these tools, even the ones that have that AI layer, you still need to build your data model. You still need to do that. That's not going away anytime soon. So I think that's unavoidable. I don't see that going away. I imagine maybe we'll get some tooling that makes it easier, hopefully, to make your data model more out of the box. Maybe that's something that Snowflake and Databricks can focus on, is really making it easy to model your data as soon as you drop it in. Maybe make some suggestions if they can kind of be like, oh, we already see you're using these tools. We kind of know how to model this. Here's some base models, versus having to go find, even Google, what's the DBT Shopify models, just have them already as an option once you load it in. So I think making more of those things easier would probably be my hope. Or maybe we don't have to do that at all. Maybe Snowflake and Databricks can finally bridge the gap between application and analytics, and then we're not doing with any of this. But that's been a goal for a long time. I mean, you had a what do you call it, Redshift or AWS do the whole zero ETL thing like 2 years back, and I don't know if a lot of people are using it, at least other than like getting Postgres data into Redshift, and then you have to use Redshift. So I don't know if people want to do that. But yeah, I don't know if I think it'll stay about the same. I think people are still figuring out what the lakehouse looks like and how to implement it correctly. Right, it's one thing to read a book; it's another thing to implement it. But yeah, so I think we're still really trying to figure that out. I'm always surprised that we and it just is this forever cycle of like, why can't we just have pre-made models more? It feels like a lot of like there's some of the pre-made models that you can kind of build, but because we have our own applications and data models, you can't build all of them. But yeah,
maybe that's something that AI could help with.
Yeah, no, I'm cool with them figuring out how to data model faster, or again, avoid data modeling, whatever. Maybe it's just a rethink completely. Maybe I'm too restricted to thinking on things in that way. And so I am trying to be like, okay, what's a good way to not think about what I've already done in the past and new ways we could do it in the future, because maybe it helps. Maybe it doesn't. I'm still occasionally using testing AI to write some queries, and sometimes it does great, and other times it doesn't. And I'm just like, all right, it's a great first iteration for me still. I haven't got it to be beyond that. So
yeah, that's a general sentiment I hear from most places, that it's good for a V0, and then from there you have to take matters into your own hands anyway.
Yeah, at least I don't have to write all the CTEs by hand. It's you got 4 of these CTEs, right? I would have had to write it by hand. This join is weird. Let me get rid of that. You've helped out some things, but you're definitely not doing everything that I need. And then of course is the whole I didn't write this, so I actually don't know what you did. Now I've got to think through it all. Is this better? I don't know if this is better.
I just hope that it's better, and just press dbt build and hope for the best.
Oh no! Oh gosh. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was great talking to you as usual. And yeah, I don't know if you have any closing statements about data warehouses or about anything else. But if you do, then yeah, now is the time.
No, I think this was great. I really appreciate you guys doing the benchmark and trying to take it your own way. I think that was some of the stuff I commented when you asked me. I was like, yeah, just make the queries more complex, which is hard because it's so hard to have to do that without having an actual problem on the other side to solve. When you're like, how do I build a query when I really don't have anything to build it for? It's hard to replicate some of the things that people build queries for. And then you see them in real life and you're like, okay, why'd you write this 5,000 line query? And then you go through it, you're like, okay, I see why you did it. This sucks. I'm sorry you have to do it this way, but you have to do it this way. Or maybe we can cut it down into different chunks, sure, but you do need all this logic in there. But you really don't, it's really always specific use cases, and it's yeah. No, they're real closing comments. I just appreciate the deep dive you guys did.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, looking forward to your thoughts on the next benchmark report as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And thank you everyone for joining as well and tuning in. And yeah, see you next time.
Yeah, thanks all.
All right.